10th of Sun's Dawn, 4E202, day 178. It was a cold, miserable night there on the exposed side of Mount Anthor. I had to keep our fire small so we did not run out of fuel, and the leather tent did not provide much protection from the frigid air. But we survived, and Anarchy looked much better that morning. After eating the last of our dried meat, we packed up and rode back into the ruins to look for the dragon. There he was, sitting like a king atop a rocky protrusion above the rune wall. Fortunately, this time, he did not see us first. I quietly led my horse back down the path and left her in what I hoped was a safe spot. We slowly crept back up the trail until we had a clear view of the dragon. I quaffed a marksman potion and a resist fire potion, and then poisoned an arrow for lingering damage. As ready as we could be, we launched a surprise volley of arrows at the beast. Feeling the arrows pierce his flesh, the dragon bellowed angrily and lifted into the air. We continued firing as fast as we could while he circled. He went first for Anarchy, but she deftly avoided his breath. Then he aimed at me, but I barely felt the heat thanks to my potion. The ground shook as the great beast finally landed in the snow to face Lola. Determined not to lose him again, I sprinted over with Frostbiter in my hand. As I rounded a pile of boulders, I saw the dragon grab Lola in its cavernous mouth. "No!" I screamed, in my heart and from my mouth. I lunged at the dragon's wing, cutting it to shreds, and then followed up with a massive swing to its chest. I felt the mace sink into soft flesh, and the sudden spray of blood confirmed I'd crushed its heart. With a whimper, Lola dropped from its jaws, somehow still alive. Overtaken once again by the life force of the dragon leeching into me, I could not move to her side. As before, I felt the awesome power, the strength, and the rage. It flowed into me, centering in my heart and my mind. Still, an unconscious part of my soul contained the energy, isolating it into a separate part of my being so I would not be overcome. The flow subsided fairly quickly, and my body was released again to free will. I rushed to Lola's side and poured healing life into her. She looked at me and wagged, then licked my hand. I could almost swear she was smiling at me. Anarchy came running, breathless and stunned to see the huge skeleton in the snow. I gave her the briefest explanation that I could, and told her we would have time to discuss it later. There was one final battle I had to face before we could leave. Learning the rune wall's word of power. The wall loomed above me, almost taunting, as I slowly walked up the steps. It was like every time before, the chanting, the drum beats, the whooshing and wisps of light emanating from the rune that I could now see glowing in a bluish cast. I forced my feet forward, sheer will pushing me through blackening vision and a feeling of terror. Once again, as in Bleak Falls Barrow, a force took hold of me. I approached the glowing rune, and its light surrounded me. With the light came warmth, feelings of rightness and belonging, as if coming home from a long journey, and ultimately, knowledge. The glowing rune imprinted itself on my brain and in my soul. I saw, I read, and I understood. This time, unlike Bleak Falls Barrow, the knowledge remained. Anarchy says that she saw me standing before the wall, a simple gray stone wall with mysterious inscriptions, and then my body writhed for a few moments. before I fell to the ground as if boneless. I woke, as before, to my companions at my side, peering at me in worry. Anarchy helped me to my feet, and I leaned on her for support. Although my body felt weak and my mind fuzzy, I remembered. I did not remember writhing or falling, but I remembered the rune. I could pick it out on the wall. I traced it with my fingers and whispered the word, Is, or ice, in the dragon tongue. It was a good thing that Anarchy and Lola were behind me, because even my whisper became a shout. Where my voice hit the wall, a solid mass of ice formed. I must remember to be cautious with these powers. Even untrained, I am stronger than I realized. Despite my weariness, I was determined to scout this area before we left for Winterhold. From the Shrine of Azura, I had seen many interesting structures and was eager to learn what they were. Anarchy helped me into Winterwisp's saddle, and we set off to the west. Although we both wanted to explore, we knew that today was not the day for flirting with danger. We only got near enough to identify each site, but we did not enter any of them to investigate. I promised her that we would come back after we completed other, more important missions. We passed by the Dwemer ruins, Alfthand, that I'd seen down the path. From there, we saw a natural stone archway, Wayward Pass, leading through the southern mountain range. Further up, on the snowy side of a tall peak, we spotted a peddler, but so too had a group of bandits, and we were too late to save the peddler from their attack. We avenged him, killing those who had attacked, as well as the rest of their band sheltered at nearby Snow Point Beacon. Not far from there was Driftshade Refuge, where we were attacked by several members of the Silver Hand. We also found an army encampment, the Winterhold Imperial camp, on a snowy plateau. There was a tower, the Frostflow Lighthouse, which appeared to be abandoned. And not far from there we found a mammoth corpse, pierced with spears and arrows and frozen in a wall of ice. Just down the path from the mammoth was a shrine to Talos, and close by that we saved some hunters from a Spriggan. A Spriggan, out here in the snow. Finally, we came across Sarthal, the ruins that everyone keeps saying the mages are excavating. Up the side of one of the peaks, we found a lone pony. His previous owner, a bandit by the look of him, lay dead in the snow. I let Anarchy keep the horse, and it sped up the rest of our day considerably. She named him Werner, after her husband, laughing that now she would get to be the master. I was too tired to explore along the coast, though I think we had a busy enough day. We continued past Sarthal and up the path to Winterhold. It was good timing. Snow had just started to fall when we arrived in town. After a hot meal and some wine, I rented a room and climbed wearily into bed. "11th of Sun's Dawn, 4E202, day 179. Sometime during the night, I awoke suddenly in a panic. I tried to raise my head, but I felt so dizzy. My head pounded, and I groaned with the effort of opening grainy eyes in the dim light. Something was not right. Where was I? I could barely see a dirty, stained floor through slitted eyes, and I detected a musty smell overlaid with the metallic scent of blood. I seemed to be in a house, an old and unkempt house, but I was at the inn, wasn't I? I felt exposed, vulnerable. Frantically, I reached for my mace, but I had no weapons and no armor. Where were my things? Through the fog in my mind, I vaguely recalled taking off my gear and crawling into bed at the frozen hearth in Winterhold. What had happened since? Gathering my courage, I looked up and slowly, very slowly, my eyes focused. A woman, shrouded and masked, sat atop a bookshelf in front of me. In a sultry voice, she asked if I slept well. My mind snapped to attention in a sharp jolt. What? Where was I? Who was this woman? I must have spoken the words aloud, for she answered in a harsh voice that none of that mattered. I was at least alive, the voice said, which was more than could be said of Grelod. Panic seized me. Was I now about to pay the real price for that horrible accident? Rhetorically, I asked in a resigned mumble if she knew about the incident. She just laughed and said that half of Skyrim knew about it. She went on to say that she wasn't criticizing me for it, that it was a good kill. What? My eyes jerked back up to her face as she continued. There was a slight problem, she said. I crossed my arms and frowned at her, and she went on to say that killing Grelod was a Dark Brotherhood contract. Apparently, they believed that I stole their kill when Grelod died. Now, she said, I must repay them by killing someone else. Kill someone else? Who? She bade me turn around, and that's when I noticed that we were not alone. 3 figures knelt behind me, each one bound and hooded. The woman said that there was a contract out on one of them, but she would not tell me which. I was to choose and then kill. My hands went to my hips, and eyes narrowed. I firmly told her that I would have no part of this insanity. She grew angry and leaned towards me as she said I had no choice. I must face the consequences of my actions. She would not let me leave the shack until someone was dead. With that ultimatum, I only took a heartbeat to make my choice. Armed with just my dagger and spells, I attacked the arrogant masked woman. She was an assassin in the employ of the Dark Brotherhood, so I had no qualms about killing her. She was skilled, very skilled, but I had right and honor and reputation on my side. As her arm dropped in the momentum following a vicious slash at my face, she left her neck exposed. I took the opportunity presented, thrust my dagger into her jugular, and she dropped to the ground. As the woman drew her final breath, I wiped my dagger clean on her hood, sheathed the blade, and turned around to face the other prisoners. I did not know who they were, and I did not want to know. I refused to be drawn in, to pass judgment on those about whom I knew nothing, and who had done nothing to harm me or mine. Approaching each in turn, I removed their hoods and cut their bonds. They were relieved and thanked me for their freedom. Too tired to care if they decided to turn on me or not, I fell onto the single bed in the middle of the shack. At least it was clean. That was my last thought before long overdue sleep took me. When I awoke, it was morning. I had an apple and some cheese in my pockets, plus a water skin, and I finished them off greedily. The prisoners were all still there, and by now they were quite annoyed, especially the woman. It took me a moment to realize that they'd been unable to leave because we were locked in. Searching the assassin's body, I found the shack key and a dagger, which glowed dimly with a red light. A quick search around the rest of the shack revealed nothing except a few potatoes. I hesitantly cracked open the door and peeked out. The sounds of early morning greeted me, but nothing else. Opening the door fully, we all strode out into a new day. The abandoned shack was on an island in a marsh. I circled the derelict building and spied several peaked domes on a high promontory in the distance. Although I could not see clearly through the fog, I was certain that nature never made those regular smooth shapes. Hoping for a city, I determined to head in that direction. There was a boat tied up on the island, but I could not find any oars. A light rain had started to fall, and since I was already getting wet, I figured that a swim wouldn't do much harm. I waded through the marsh, taking the most direct route possible towards the blue domes. At one point, I noticed 3 figures walking towards me. I tried to skirt wide around them when a fireball suddenly blasted right before my face. Looking closer, I realized that they were cultists. Sweet Akatosh, it was like kicking a dog when it was already down. Arming myself with my own firebolts, I rounded on them. I don't know if my dragon blood provides some resistance to fire, or if I was just lucky, but I managed to run right through their spells. Reaching each one from melee, I hit first with the full blast of a firebolt, and then gutted them with my dagger. Once they were all down, I searched the corpses, but found nothing useful except a cloak. I continued ahead until I found myself standing against the huge pillar of rock on which I had seen the domes. I could see nothing above me and no sign of a way to get up. As I circled around, I came to a river. Above was a natural stone bridge connecting the pillar to a larger mountain of stone. Looking up, I could see the rectangular peaked roof of a large building on the other side of the bridge. It must be a city. I jumped into the river and swam across. I followed a cobbled road up and around to the gates of the city, which turned out to be solitude. I was desperate to find my way back to Anarchy and Lola, afraid that they would be frantic at my disappearance. But I was also cold, wet, and in need of some warmer human contact than what I'd had in the shack. I decided to stop for just a while and enjoy a mug of ale at the local inn. Stepping inside the city gates, I was greeted with a most unpleasant sight. A man was being executed right there by the front gate. I was astonished that a ruler would allow this to be a visitor's first taste of their city. Having experienced enough violence for one day, I turned away quickly in search of an inn. By Mara's mercy, the winking skeever was situated right across from the site of the execution. Head down, I hurried through the door. A courier stopped me just inside the inn. He said that there was a new lady in charge of the orphanage in Riften, and he'd been asked to hand out adoption notices to everyone he met. Opening the note, I was pleasantly surprised to see that Constance was the new headmistress, and that she was actively seeking homes for all of the children. By the gods, could some good actually come out of the whole sordid affair? I ordered a mug of ale and some horker loaf and settled down at a table by the fire. One of my table mates was a bard, so I asked if she would be willing to perform a song. She happily obliged. Meanwhile, a little girl sat with me and we chatted. She was the daughter of the innkeeper, and her name was Minette Vinius. Although she talked plenty, I can't say that I learned very much of this city or its people. I did not mind. I let the child's voice, the bard's song, and the glowing hearth lull me back into a sense of calm control. It was a restorative hour and worth every moment. Before leaving, I bought some dried beef, a loaf of bread, and an apple for my trip back to Winterhold. I'd noticed a carriage outside town and walked back down the road to avail myself of its services. It was raining in earnest, but I did not want to delay returning to my companions. It cost me 50 gold and took the better part of the day, but by supper time we were reunited. Not only was I overjoyed to see Anarchy and Lola again, but I have never been so happy to don my armor and swing my mace. Not to mention the relief I felt at getting my maps and journal back. We bought a nice dinner and drinks for the house to celebrate our reunion. Many songs and toasts later, we called it a night.